We're proud to partner with Bunker Hill Community College, powering Boston's future workforce through access, equity, and innovation in higher education. Thank you for supporting Rooted in the Future of Public Media. Click the link in the description or visit bhcc.edu to learn more. Right now on Rooted, we're joined by Reverend Chris Hope, a tech activist, spiritual leader, and advocate for Black liberation through digital justice. In a world where data is currency and algorithms shape opportunity, Reverend Hope is asking the hard questions. Who owns our information? Who benefits from our digital footprints? And how can ethical AI be a tool for empowerment rather than oppression? So let's get right into it. Reverend Hope, can AI really be ethical?
It can, absolutely. It's imperative in this 21st century that it is ethical for the sake of all human beings, as well as African Americans and people of the Afro diaspora. What's happening now is you're seeing large companies, big companies, using AI to fire large numbers of people. And ethical AI is about teaching people new skills, not replacing them. So for us, it really becomes imperative morally and ethically as a society to create systems in place where, one, the technology is reflecting or being shaped by us, not just something that we use, but is being shaped by our morality, being shaped by the kind of society that we want.
And honestly, it's already being shaped by our data, right? By the things that we do on the internet. So how do we stake ownership in this space when we really don't control it?
That's absolutely right. Obviously, for those who are concerned about privacy, which is a huge concern, there are some software that allows you to opt out and participate. So really just overall AI literacy, knowledge, and our people perish for lack of knowledge. So we have to educate ourselves about what's out there, what are the trade-offs that you're essentially giving away in terms of your personal information, private information, by using much of the software. And then in the midst of that, I would say another layer to this is supporting legal and also legislative documents, legislative bills that can support and advocate for our privacy, advocate for how this technology is being used on populations and on us.
And what are some examples of things that we can opt out of? Because it's not always very clear. Like I even think about when you go to the airport and they have the whole eye scan, you can opt out of that, people, just so you know.
Yeah, absolutely. The eye scan, as you said, at the airport, you can opt out of that. But also just using other software in terms of, I'm sure most people, when they sign on for a new software, it gives you an opportunity to either opt in or opt out, whether that is something like, I'm not going to name a specific brand, but there's so many other kind of permutations of what that looks like. It just it allows people to be discerning and to make their own decisions. There's a lot of AI agent tools, AI automation tools, that if you sign in, it gives you the opportunity to do that. But in order to do that, they need access to pretty much your entire your life. And so there's a trade-off there. And what the Hope Group does is we help educate people on ways that they can maybe get around that, if you will, to protect themselves, but also still be able to use these tools, because at the end of the day, these tools are neutral. Right? These tools are there to be a force multiplier and to provide for many people an opportunity, especially small business owners and entrepreneurs. It allows them to do things that mostly bigger companies have been able to do until now.
Now, I want to talk about that because at a lot of bigger companies, there are layoffs that are happening as a result of the things that can be done by automation. I'm just thinking about this past Afrotech conference in Houston, which really highlighted the impact of automation firsthand. Over 22,000 tech layoffs happened this year, with 16,000 in February alone. And in fact, at Afrotech, people were learning in real time that they were being laid off. So why do you still believe that AI can be a solution when it's causing a really big issue on the job front?
I wouldn't say it's the AI, the technology itself that's causing the problem. It's unfortunately decisions that are being made on the corporate level that are really at the root of the problem. And they've always been at the root of the problem of so many problems in this country and also abroad. Greed is real. And this is not progress in terms of technology when you're using the technology to replace people. That's not progress. Progress is you allowing people to learn and educating them with new skills so they can adapt into this new workforce that we're in. You know, the technology right now in the mainstream is not at a level where it can just operate on itself. In fact, there's been studies that have shown, even recently at Harvard, that have indicated that the AI technology and generative AI is best used in collaboration with other human beings. And that is the most effective way to get output, or the most productive output. By replacing the people with AI, there's a whole nother set of concerns that you have. There's been data that has come out in the last year that have shown that there's been AI that have essentially made really ill choices and decisions when put into certain scenarios,
Providing misinformation.
Putting misinformation out there. There's so many things that are kind of questionable, and to be honest with you, my colleagues that are in Silicon Valley and Kendall Square and Cambridge that are working on this stuff, many of them don't even know how or why the different AIs are acting and operating like this.
I mean, it's moving so fast.
There's a black box element to this, absolutely.
And it's beneficial, right? Like I, along with many other people, use AI on a regular basis to do those sort of mundane tasks, or even just to help kind of think through a problem, right? But we know that there hasn't been a whole lot of regulation up until this point. But this is a conversation that is growing, and I know that you've been working with U.S. Senator Ed Markey on an AI Bill of Rights. Tell us more about this and how it would protect Black communities in particular. Absolutely.
So Senator Ed Markey and also others and myself are working towards what's called the AI Civil Rights Act, which would allow us to, well, not us, but it would allow the United States to finally have a framework to really start regulating and to start creating more protections for people. You know, when you talk about Bill of Rights and Civil Rights Act, those are there to protect people, not just profits. And right now, we're just seeing, unfortunately, in the United States, pretty much if you have the money to play, then you can play. And it's often at the expense, though, for those who are on the other side of the algorithm, which tends to be black and brown folks and other folks that are not underrepresented, underestimated in our society. And so Senator Ed Markey and others have already written this act last year. I'm helping to do a lot of community organizing, bringing the faith communities together, other spaces together to, one, bring education around AI, but also the need for folks to participate in the tech economy. You know, one of the things that concerns me is the pipeline. You know, this is the future of work that we're living in. And there's so many people that are so scared about AI, don't know how to use AI, but many of the jobs that are being created now and the jobs that are going to be created in the foreseeable future are going to have a huge emphasis on AI technology knowledge and competency. So there's a huge gap there. And on one side, it's appealing because, as we all know, with new tools and if you give everyone the new toolkit, it helps level the playing field a little, and that's the opportunity. But the downside is if folks are not really learning and not really adjusting to what's happening quickly enough, they can be left behind. And so I've started several initiatives to try to bring folks into the tech economy that are underestimated. So the Loop Lab is a nonprofit that I started 8 years ago to bring young adults into the audio video technology trades, which has also been disrupted by AI, but we actually integrate that in our curriculum now. And so they're learning how to automate, how to use AI agents, how to edit, because now when you think about Adobe Suite and so many others, they're already using AI and integrating that within it.
You can just type in, hey, I need you to take the lasso tool or whatever, just remove the background, make it one way or the other.
Because there's opportunity there. The AI can help business move faster. It can help you do the task faster, ideally more effectively, but it still needs a co-pilot. It still needs that human aspect. And the technology from the framework of this Civil Rights Act is that ultimately the technology has to serve humanity, not just profits.
So what is one piece of advice that you would leave with us, specifically with Black folks, on how they can have autonomy in their use of AI?
I would say get on the wave, because if you're not on the wave on one side of the algorithm, you're going to end up, unfortunately, be on the other side, which is the bias. And we're already seeing that now within the federal government. We're seeing that also in law enforcement. We're seeing that in other permutations. I sit on the board of the Brandeis Racial Justice and Tech Policy Board, and we review cases from all over the country, all over the region, about how the technology is integrated in so much, but is being either weaponized, misused, or the algorithm has so much biases that people are getting misidentified in law enforcement.
Yes.
All kinds of things when you talk about facial recognition challenges.
Oh my goodness.
Vocal recognition challenges. So
get on the wave.
We have to get on the wave so that
Don't
we
let
can
it wash over you.
Right. So that we can not just use this technology, but shape it. And shape it for our communities.
So one thing that you mentioned was how you're working with faith communities,
right?
To make this equitable. Tell me more about the connection between AI and spirituality.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a proponent that, much like the early church, one of the biggest legacy pieces of early Christianity were the letters. Right? When you had the Apostle Paul and others, right? James, others that were writing the letters. That's what we have 2,000 years later. Those letters did more for Christendom, believe it or not, than the establishment of those early churches, like the Church of Philadelphia, other churches that we read about in the New Testament. And AI is our modern letters, because the letter in itself is a medium. It's a medium to transmit, communicate information to people.
So I have this theory, Reverend Hope.
Yeah, okay.
I kind of think AI is low-key our ancestors trying to communicate with us. I don't have any way to prove this, but just rock with me for a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it. I like Afrofuturism. Let's get it.
If that's the case, what are they saying in these letters?
What they're saying is that we have to get on board. We have to get on board. One of the things about that is the medium itself is neutral. AI, I say AI is a force multiplier. And if you're able to, for example, in the early church, you had the letters and those were sent out. And they were essentially ways to model Christian behavior to other churches, but also they were a way to educate people on how to create and set up a church. Similarly, now we have an opportunity here within the Christian church to really use AI to, one, support our businesses, because the church and the house of worship is a business, right? So there's so much that's reliant on volunteer work. Now you actually have tools that can, help schedule the pastor and what he needs, or also respond to emails and inquiries, right? You have so much of the back end now that can be covered by utilizing a lot of these technologies, where you see a lot of houses of worship struggling with that, because again, they're so dependent on volunteer work. Another thing is, how can you spread the gospel? Now you have an opportunity to do optimization, put the word of God out there at a higher level on Instagram, Facebook, all these different channels, and really be able to advance this kind of information to folks.
But in some cases, congregations are also deploying AI for spiritual advice. So there was an NPR, listen, there was an NPR segment, I can't remember which show it was on, but I heard where people were basically doing these virtual confessionals. Yeah. And that makes me wonder, okay, so is the preacher or the father's job in jeopardy?
The answer is no. I will say that, and I will emphasize, there needs to be a level of discernment and related to a lot of these startups that are creating many of these kinds of products that you're referring to. Like, I remember there being a product recently that was released, an app that essentially acts as Jesus. And actually, if you ask the AI, if you ask the AI
like
agent,
Jesus, not act as Jesus.
No, it says it is Jesus. Like, if and things like that are very concerning, because on one hand, they're not coming out of any particular denomination or recognized church organization. 9 times out of 10, it's a startup that founders are trying to sell this and get rich and move on, or whatever motive they might have. The second thing that's concerning is similar to what we're seeing now with the emergence of more mental health kind of counseling AI apps.
A lot of people use ChatGPT.
There can be some terrible consequences to that. There have been instances where, for example, on the mental health side, people have taken the advice and have actually committed suicide.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think similarly when you talk about people going to an AI pastor or an AI priest, that is, I think, a ill approach to how to utilize the technology. Now, if you're talking about helping you with Bible study or helping you select certain scriptures that might encourage your life, get you to a place of peace when you're going through turmoil, then I'm all for it. Or maybe journaling. Absolutely. I think those are, and again, it's a tool.
Yeah,
and we should not confuse the tool with God. Just like you wouldn't confuse a pencil.
That's a whole other root of segment. Reverend Hope, you about to start preaching in here today. So I do want to ask, because there's been this huge proliferation of data centers that's happening a lot in the southeastern United States.
Right.
I'm from North Carolina. There's a big Toyota plant coming. Yeah. Oh, excellent, fellow Southerner. So like I think about the example of there's this huge Toyota plant that's coming to the area near where I grew up, and it's great because it's providing all these jobs. But at the same time, what is the spillover effect, especially when you think about the fact that a lot of these data centers are happening in Black communities, right, that have already seen things like, the effects of big coal mines or other big industry plants, right, that are creating rising rates of cancer, for instance. So what should we be worried about there?
Oh, absolutely. We have to be worried about the environmental effects. In order to build these massive data centers, they require fresh water. And unfortunately, as we're seeing more and more on the corporate side, they are placing these data centers in areas where, as you shared before, are usually marginalized communities, whether rural or otherwise, unfortunately, predominantly people of color. And this is a very, very serious issue. When you talk about air pollution in those areas, and they've already done studies, and this is a global issue, by the way. It's not just United States and in the southeast United States. This is all over. We're really coming at a point where with the AI Civil Rights Act, we need more regulation, and that's part of the act. That's part of actually making sure that companies have to meet certain metrics in order to actually set up a data center in terms of what they're building and how it's going to be applied.
How do we balance allowing for greater access to, because you were talking earlier about, Black people needing to get on the wave, but how do you get on the wave if you don't even have access, number one, right? Because we know that about the whole digital divide and lower income communities not having the same access to internet.
Absolutely.
But even as we're trying to open that door, how do we balance people not being exploited physically, digitally, or otherwise by this very data that we're seeing expanding?
Absolutely. I would say the first key is educating yourself. Many people are seeing things online and on television around AI, and unfortunately, the majority of it is very negative. And so people's perspective often is that they're just going to stay away from it altogether. And I believe first demystifying what it is really for yourself becomes key, and then taking agency. And that can look like going online, actually there's free certification courses, free courses that you can actually explore what this is, and also figure out for yourself where you stand on the line of whether or not this is something that needs to exist in our world. I see the value of it. But I also see the wanton destruction that could happen, not only for Black folks, but our entire society, if we do not emphasize that the technology is there to serve love, not just profits. And that is what I'm advancing with the beloved community, digital beloved community.
How do Black people, because so much of whether it's the data center or just our everyday use of AI is being stewarded by these big companies.
Right.
But how does the everyday Black person or the collective, right? Because we talk, you mentioned Afrofuturism. So how do we begin to build our own things that we can actually own? I'm a huge
Absolutely.
blockchain enthusiast, for
Yes.
instance. Are
too.
there ways that we can begin to say, well, I'm gonna leverage this for my own?
Absolutely. I would say right now is an amazing time to build Black wealth in this country like never before. As I shared earlier, small businesses now have access to some of the same tools that only bigger businesses had. So I would say if you're really interested, start creating these companies. Start creating your own company. Start creating these products. That was the vision of my company, the Hope Group. We started out with just focusing on how to bridge the divide with people not knowing how to utilize some of these emerging technologies and how to do so coming from the Black community and other communities. And now it's expanded around the world. I just came back from Mexico City, doing work with them in the Loop Lab. I just sharing all of that it really becomes educating yourself, taking your agency, and you know what? If you want to create the new blockchain, you can do that. There's literally AI agents that can help you develop that. If you want to create a new website, a new software, right now is really the time to do it. But with that being said, I have to emphasize the ethical aspect of it. At the end of the day, we want to create technologies that makes the human life and human society better in that it can help you do a task more. It should not be, though, the end all just for profits. And I think that for me, that's the really emphasis on that.
I have to ask you lastly, as AI does take on some of these more mundane jobs or tasks, what do people do from there? Like, can we say, okay, well, I ain't got to work no more.
Right.
I can go enjoy my life? Or what is our future
There's
look
going to be
like?
plenty of work to do. Don't worry. This happens every period of time. So, for example, when cars first came out, and people don't remember this, but people like me who are nerds on history study this. When the first cars came out and were made into the mainstream, there were so many accidents and deaths that were caused by it. We're talking about like tens of thousands of deaths like just happening. It got to a point where they could have just easily said, we're no longer going to make cars anymore. Or, you know what? We see the value of the car. Let's start making crosswalks. Let's start making street lights and traffic signs and actually think about the ecosystem and create a framework by which we can actually have this thing that's bringing advantage to our society. And so I think we're similarly in that place where in the United States, at least, we have this incredible technology. Things are happening so quick, but we're also seeing the backlash and we're seeing the negative impact of it. We just need crosswalks. we need to start building the signs. And going back to the legislation piece, that is exactly what Senator Ed Markey, myself, and others in the U.S. Senate are trying to push through and get communities of color to advocate in our behalf and others, because this is the future. This is the now. And if we don't get ahead of the algorithm, we're going to be behind it.
No.
And
Well, I hope you and I are still in our jobs, 10, 20 years from now, and we can talk more about this and do a look back at that moment. Reverend Chris Hope, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Bunker Hill Community College is inspiring dreams through academic excellence, community engagement, and workforce partnerships. Learn more at bhcc.edu.